Mike White here. How are you? Welcome to August, and today's call, I want to go into a couple of different things that you're going to think is a little weird to talk about in August, but you'll see how it all comes together. And it has a big piece on how I've talked to my clients and gone through coaching processes with them. And it's one of the things as I started to prepare for my schedule, I thought it was important to share with you guys because it is. And this week's conversation is going to be about the mortgage calendar and something I call the last third. And you're not used to talking in terms of the calendar in thirds. Most people in businesses and things like that talk about calendars or corporate calendars and by quarters. To me, the mortgage business has always been about 3 seasons, 3/3 of a year, which were distinctly different to me, and I've always guided my business accordingly, and I thought it was important to share. And you'll see some of the things that I'm talking about as we go through this, because a lot has to do with the gestation period of our clients and how long loans tend to take. So what I've done is I've taken the mortgage business and I've broken it down into 3 groups, 3/3 of the calendar. And I start them off January through April, then we go through May into August, and then the last third is September in through December. And it's really important that you look at this and understand that there are some differences between these thirds, as well as some similarities. But the differences are really big, and they're really important to note that you have in your mind these things because you need to prepare for them in a lot of ways. And so let's take a look at this calendar, and let's take a look at this material, and we'll walk through it, and I'll touch on the first 2/3 lightly, and we'll get more important and more involved in the last third because that's the one that's present. We'll talk more about this in December for the January to April third, and we'll talk more about it next April going into the May-August cycle. But I really wanted to come to here because there are some really major events that are happening this year that you need to be ready for and you need to be aware of. And so I put this out there and hope that you'll see the value in this. So the 3 seasons that we talked about, and again, briefly, season 1, it's new beginnings. It's the first of the year. All of us start at 0. Our realtors start at 0. All the numbers, all the bonuses, all the things have been calculated. So season 1, the January beginning, the January through April, the focus tends to be, new beginnings. And the main focus on a lot of the business in January starts to be with listings. It's agents tend to start having the conversation with people who are thinking of selling their home. They're often thinking of selling a home and buying another home. A lot of those things come from New Year's resolutions. So new beginnings, while you will find some first-time home buyers who have made that decision to think about it this year, they're not thinking of physically buying yet, but they're thinking about the process. So season 1, that January through April piece, is really built upon listings and the things that you can be doing with your referral partners that help grow the number of listings that they can put in their inventory, because that's when this process starts to really get going on things. The people who want to sell their house, obviously, that becomes the product that is available for us so that we can go buy, or the people can come by later on. So the season 1 new beginnings listings is something that we need to focus on. It doesn't mean we stop all other things. It just means that the biggest item, the number 1 priority that you need to be focused on and paying attention to is the possibility of listing property for sale. And your action should be focused upon that. Season 2 is the action phase. Now, Season 2 runs from May through August, and clearly that's when most of the purchase transactions will be consummated. Most of the deals that will close are going to happen between May and August. It coincides, obviously, with kids getting out of school or finishing up their school year. There's a lot of people don't want to move, don't want to change residences while the kids are still in school. So a lot of the time, the actual physical purchasing and buying, the peak time for that mentality to be there, taking that action, is going to be in Season 2 or the month between May and August. So be aware, again, Season 2 is now more focused. The number one priority now becomes on those people who are in the buying mode or the moving mode. They're selling and moving. This is when you change gears. We're still looking for listings, clearly. We're still helping our people find those people who want to sell, but it's no longer the top priority, the buying and the moving part. Those become the focus of what needs to have happen. So think of that as, again, we're changing the priority list. It's not exclusionary. We're still doing some things. We're just upping the frequency or the intensity or both of the pinnacle actions there. And the last season, the one that I really want to talk about today, and the one that I really want to get in, really deep with, is the whole concept of the third season. And this year in particularly, because the calendar really comes into vogue in a very meaningful way. And you're going to see this as we go through this webinar, that we're going to focus on this calendar and the different things that it means and why it becomes important and what I want to prepare you for. So urgency and interruptions. Season 3 is that whole area between September through the end of the year in December, going to January, is a sense of urgency, which is very apparent with people who have either missed the school year or need to get things done before the end of the year for a number of different reasons. That urgency is out there, and the interruptions are numerous. And part of the reason I'm bringing it up today, because this year, more than any other year that I can remember, it becomes a perfect storm. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a minute. So our focus today is going to be the Season 3, the urgency and the interruptions. And let's take a look. The urgency is the kids are back to school. And that can mean a lot of things. And what I want you thinking about, that back to school, is not just the little ones. There are very distinct times kids either enter school for the first time, and they're starting school, so now a part of their day for the first time is being occupied outside their home, and now, or they're going back to school, and for some of them it could mean changing schools. It could be moving from the grade school to the middle school to high school. And for some, it's also the change of kids who are leaving high school and going off to college. And the reason I bring that up, urgency, is because those things happen. Those things are the thing that comes in. And at the same token, while it is an interruption, because you see I have it on both sides, it's also that opportunity. Because a lot of times in the moment of the children going back to school or going off to school, we have a huge opportunity. And while it may put some things on hold, getting ready to get the kids back or getting them back, and any of you who have had children understand that getting kids back to school doesn't end with the first day of school. It's the first night when they start coming home with their lists of things that they need that we didn't manage to buy yet, because there's always a specific book or a calculator or a pen or a crayon or some sort of a tool or software that we don't have or didn't prepare for that we have to go and get. So the urgency of the kids going back to school and then the interruption of that actually happening are both sides of this situation. The other urgency is that winter is coming. And, fall, we get in there and we all, we look at the glory days, the mentality of, football season starts and everybody's mind starts gearing up and the leaves start to go. And I know in the middle of August, this is not something that you want to be talking about, but it is something from our standpoint we need to prepare for. Just thinking of the time frame, the gestation period, if you will, of our clients. The buying process, depending on who you are, is not immediate. Very few people wake up in the morning and say, hey, it's time to go buy a house, and the first thing they do is contact their mortgage person and have all their documents together and get themselves pre-approved for the loan and go find a house and enter into a contract. The process is 90, 120, 150, 180 days, depending on your market, from the time that they think about getting into the process of buying a house to the time that it actually closes a transaction. Well, we have to start thinking about that in August and preparing people, simply because we're in August and it's not 180 days away before the year is over. Remember, we've only got right now 4 months left, 4.5 months left. So you've got a little more than 145 days before this year is over, and it may not seem important today, August 14th, that it is. But as your people start coming to you, you need to be the one that starts preparing them and looking at the calendar and telling them and preparing them for what interruptions will be coming in, because we are facing the end of the year. This year in particularly, there are a couple of things that make this end of the year more significant. So let me tell you, one of the reasons that I think it's more significant is for those of you who are in areas that have short sales, and a number of short sales. All of us have gotten used to the fact that these short sales are going in and they're getting done. And then in most cases, depending on the state that you're in, there is no deficiency judgment once the house is sold. And there is no tax liability for the difference between the amount owed and the amount received by the bank. For those of you who remember, in the past, short sales were such that not only could the bank pursue a deficiency judgment, in other words, go after you for the difference, but the IRS would also come after you if that was forgiven, because it would be deemed as income, and you would have to pay taxes on that. Well, Congress passed legislation that waived that taxability part of that gift, but that expires on December 31st. So the ability to go into short sale, and even if the bank forgives the debt, as of January 1st of next year, if Congress doesn't act, that money goes back to being taxable again. That's significant. And it needs to be something that you are aware of. It needs to be something that you follow. While we're on the topic of taxes, you really need to be paying attention to things like the tax extension filings. Again, religious observances and national holidays. These are the interruptions that get in the way. These are the things that happen that make people busy, but they also bring forward opportunities. And I want to go through these based on this year's calendar and share with you some of the things that I have done in the past and some of the things that I have worked with people in the past on, and what I'm looking to this year for being the big deal. Because we have a calendar unlike any other that I can remember that make this really important to deal with. So understand that the urgency with the kids going back to school, winter's coming, the end of the year, we have to deal with and understand the interruptions especially of tax extension filings, religious observances, and the national holidays, as well as some self-imposed. So let's take a look at this, okay, because here becomes the really important part about this. Important dates to remember. Now, I can't go through every school district and every private school for the number of different people who are on this call. It's all important. But one of the first things that every one of us needs to do, if you've got kids in school, make sure that you pay attention to the flyers and things that come home. There's often an event calendar. The school calendar is usually already done. And if you've got people that you do business with, whether they be referral partners, whoever, who have children that go to different schools than your children do, or go to school and you don't have any children that are going to school, then you need to ask them to do you a favor and make a copy of that calendar. Because not only is your public school calendar, but your private school calendars are very important to know what days and dates things are going to be about, what days and dates may or may not be plausible for them to have closings on, or days and dates that they are going to try to target having closings on because the kids are out of school. So the first thing up here that I put in here is Labor Day, and that this year comes up September 9th. And you need to be aware of is by September 9th, Labor Day, or the week of Labor Day, all of you, all the kids in all your areas should be back at school or going back to school that week. So Labor Day needs to trigger something in your mind that says, I need to get every school calendar that I can get my hands on for each individual school. Now understand, the grade school calendar is likely to be different than the junior high school calendar or the middle school calendar. And that calendar could also be different from the high school calendar. And for those of you who deal with children who are off to college, I live in Florida, so I know that spring break runs pretty much from January through April. Why? Because they stagger them. Well, here are the things that you need to be aware of. How many different schools are in your marketplace, both public and private, that have different session schedules that may interfere with what it is that you're doing, that may be a reason to either point toward or away from specific dates. Labor Day is the day that you need to start paying attention to this and start constructing your final third calendar. One of the dates that you're going to want to put on there after you've got this calendar is to look at October the 16th. And you'll say, well, why is that important? Well, for those people who file the tax extension back in April, they've got to file, they've got a 6-month extension. Well, guess what? They're going to be scrambling to make sure that those filings get done by October 16th. Now, why is that important? Well, there's a number of reasons that that becomes important. Number one, first of all, if you're planning on having any type of a conversation with your accountants or your financial planners, you probably want to avoid that week going in and coming out of, because they're going to be extremely busy. Because here's something that you want to pay attention to. Most of the people, not all, but most of the people who have filed for extension tend to be self-employed or small business owners or both. And the reason, okay, that they file for that extension is to give themselves time to put their documents together and get all their ducks in a row so that they can file their taxes correctly. Now, understand this. For those of you who are in this market where you have a lot of self-employed borrowers, or you work with a lot of self-employed people, or you work with people who are on commissions, that filing of that tax return is a huge opportunity. Why? Because now we can use that income. We've been waiting for those tax returns to get done. Those tax returns and their year-to-date filings now become really important information For qualifying purposes, you know and I know we're going to need to verify those tax returns. We may very well need that income, that year-to-date income that has already been prepared is going to go a long way. Those things will already be documents, things that you're going to end up asking for. You will already have documented because the accountants and the financial planners and the clients themselves will have been pulling this information together. So mark on this calendar, again, October 16th. Why? Because that's when their extensions have to be completed so that they can be filed. I mean, it is a very simple process to understand that these are the things that get in the way that also present themselves as opportunity. October 31st, Halloween. Now I put that on there, and I put it on there every year because for me, it was always a targeted event. It was one of those quote-unquote holidays that I wanted to make a point of adopting going into the quote-unquote holiday season, because I know some people, you know, they deal with Christmas and they deal with New Year's and Thanksgiving, and to my part is Halloween was always a fun holiday. It was kind of carefree. Some people pay attention to it, but very few people go crazy sending Halloween cards or engaging in Halloween. For me, it was always a target because most of my clients had families, and in my practice, it was always nice to go to a pumpkin farm and have it, you know, make an arrangement with that pumpkin farm so I could invite, you know, my clients to the pumpkin farm so they can go out and pick pumpkins, and we'd have face painting and pumpkin painting, and we'd have prizes for the kids and all those things. It was an event that we used to do every year. For those of you who know me know I'm a big fan of adopting at least one holiday a year. Well, for me, the holiday that I'd like to adopt, one of them was Halloween. If you can adopt more than one, certainly that's great, but if you're not, you know, if you're not adopting a holiday as of yet, then start with one. Learn what it takes to put together adopting a holiday. Think right now in your calendar. If you're in August, believe it or not, this is the lead time you're going to need. You'd have to start working on your Halloween party right about now. You'd have to be speaking to people about getting, you know, pumpkins or face painters or pumpkin painters, or, you know, some of those things you were going to do if you were going to have a party. You'd have to start preparing your list and who are you going to invite and what was it going to be and what was your budget going to be. How are you going to do this? What would it take? Well, if something's going to happen the end of October, you'd need to start planning on it now. Why? Because the time passes a lot faster than you think. Now, the next part here is really something that is going to really cause a crimp in our business. This year, Thanksgiving falls on November 22nd. November 22nd is the earliest possible day Thanksgiving can ever fall on. Well, this year, we win. November 22nd will be Thanksgiving this year, and traditionally, that means a couple of things. Obviously, Black Friday is the day after, but in our mortgage and real estate community, as well as other businesses, the holiday season, the holiday parties, all those things begin to happen the week after Thanksgiving. The fact that it starts earlier this year, the earliest possible date that there is, shortens the end of the year dramatically. That week, as the parties start to go, then people have more and more excuses not to be working, not to be looking, not to be pushing. If you go back to where, you know, you go back to where Thanksgiving has been later, the 27th, 28th, and 29th, it's almost a week later. So at the earliest possible day, Thanksgiving is going to reduce our quote-unquote normal environment by almost a week. You look at that, it is 3 weeks this year from Halloween to Thanksgiving, 3. That becomes very important. And while it still remains the same, the number of, weeks between when Thanksgiving is, it changes dramatically how December sets up. And let me share with you, Christmas this year and New Year's this year fall on Tuesdays, which means the Eves fall on Monday, which means for all practical purposes we're losing those days. So if you look at the calendar, December 21st is the last full day to close before you hit the interruptions, December 21st. And the only full days, the last week of 2012, that there's going to be to close alone are going to be December 27th and 28th. Only 2 days. So when you start thinking about this, and again, it all runs into, I don't care who you are, we all know this. I don't care that Christmas or New Year's is on Tuesday and the Eve is on Monday. You know as well as I do, people are going to look at this as a long weekend, right? It's a 5-day, in their mind, it's going to be a 4 or 5 day weekend, which means Friday, people are going to be heading out early, or at least wanting to. So that becomes an issue. Look at this and say, pull out your own calendar and look, and say, this becomes a very real deal. When you stretch it out, there's 2.5 weeks. By the time you go from December 21st through January the 2nd, you're going to have 2 days. And then understand, when we hit January the 2nd, it's only the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th before we run into another weekend. The first full week back to work that you're going to see is not going to be until January the 7th. Think about that. So from December 21st through January the 7th, there will be 5 days in which you can close loans. That's very scary when you think about, if you guys have had, and again, not everybody works for the same place or not everybody works for the same company, but everybody in the industry has had some challenges with making sure things close on time. Everybody in the industry has had challenges, especially when it comes to refinances, about getting them set up, scheduled, and closed in a reasonable time frame. Most of you work with very forward-thinking companies who do a great job of getting their purchase transactions closed as a matter of priority. And even then, what happens if you have these purchase transactions and you condense December 31st through January the 7th, and you knock that down to 5 full days in which you can close? How does that compress your calendar? These are the things we need to start thinking about. Now, from a management standpoint and from a company standpoint, there are certain things that you can do. Certain places will be open and will fund and close on Saturdays. Certain places will certainly open on the eve and get some business taken care of the mornings of the eve. I absolutely guarantee that there will be those that do that. But the point that I'm trying to make is you have to plan for the fact that it may or may not happen. We talk about this a lot when we do our coaching about setting the expectation. We've talked about things that can happen, about setting expectations. What's going to happen? Especially now when we talked about the short sales. How many more people is that going to throw into the mix? I mean, normally the last week of any month is a crazy month to try to close a loan. I'm sure we all have been party to that, how absolutely crazy it can be the last week of any month. For those of us who've been through the business, the last week of the year is even more incredibly busy, because you take the one that ends the month and understand the end of the year, there are certain tax liabilities or advantages to having closed in certain years, whether it be capital gains, capital loss, tax brackets, all those other things. Add to that the expiration of the benefit of the taxability of the forgiveness on a short sale, and there's going to even be more pressure on this year than there has been in recent years, and yet we're going to be contracted by the number of days that we can close. Now again, when I talk about marking the calendar, one of the other things that we have to talk about here that's not listed is the diversity of our environment. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is there are some people who have certain religious holidays, and all the religions seem to have a number of holidays in the last part of the year. And their observances and their traditions are very important, and they need to be respected. Well, there are certain holidays and there are certain situations that to you and me may not seem to be something that stand out, but to that client or to a seller or to a party of that transaction, a closing will never take place on certain days. There is no way that you're going to get certain people to engage in certain activities on certain days. And you have to be respectful of that. You have to be prepared for that. So the last part about what I want you to do when you look at the important dates, and these are not all of them, these are the ones that I threw up there, you've got to look into your own community and say, in my community, do I have a certain diversity of religion that I may have to take into account? I knew, for example, when I was in the business back on Long Island in New York, I had very real issues. We have a very large Jewish population. But my closing attorney for my company was also Jewish. And he was often, and he would never be at work on some of those holidays. In fact, it took a long time before he had a partner, but which he even felt uncomfortable having a partner that would do the closings, and the office would technically be open, but we could only do half the number of transactions because we only had the one partner there. That became a very big thing on certain holidays. And we had to schedule for that, and we had to prepare people for that. And you have to prepare your people as well. And I don't, I know that to some of us, some of these situations may or may not be all that important. But it only has to be important to one person. And it would appear to be disrespectful. So if it can jump up and hurt you, then it does a great deal for your professional integrity to write down all the dates that may be important. And it's not wrong of you if you're not clear as to what dates are more important than others, to find a friend or somebody that you know, or a referral partner, and ask them for help and say, I'm not sure about this. Could you help me with this? I don't want to be disrespectful, but I do want to have an awareness of the situation. So you need to find in your own market, you have to find the appropriate religious calendars as an overlay to these dates, to these situations, because they're going to be very important. Believe me, they'll be very important, and you don't want to get yourself caught. So action steps for the final third. We have to be in a position where we're taking action. None of this conversation does us any good if we don't sit here and we don't come up with an action plan. Because without an action plan, This is just a conversation. So what do I want you to do? Well, I want you to get out a traditional calendar. Get your traditional calendar handy. I like to use my one that's a desk blotter, but you can use any one that you want. You can do it in a book. I don't know how many of you have, paper calendars anymore or doing it electronically. It doesn't really matter to me. But get the calendar out. Some of them will be equipped with certain holidays already programmed into them, and some you're going to have to move over. And the first thing that you're going to have to do is get that traditional calendar and start looking at what traditionally looks at the days and become aware of where the days are and how far forward you need to be. Again, for those of you who are involved in certain markets where appraisals take a certain period of time and certain work takes certain periods of time, you know how long these transactions can spell out. If you start getting people to look now, these people very well could run into the holidays. You need to be asking, what was their intention? When did they want to close and move in by? And start becoming aware of the traditional calendar, and just like we do with our production, back those days out and know if it's going to take 30 to 45 days for them to complete a transaction, well, how long is it going to take them to look? Get and collect your local school calendars. Some of you are in areas where you have multiple school districts. You may have multiple counties. Heck, some of you are in areas where you have multiple states. Some holidays aren't even the same. Some people celebrate, some people are off on certain holidays and they're not in others. So for those of you who are working those markets, it's important to find out. And it's not like with the internet, you can't go and find them relatively easily. And get your local school calendars along with private school calendars. You need to be aware of what's going on and why. And then what I want you to do is I want you to put together one calendar with all the important dates so that you're aware of it. Color-code it if you have to make it easier to pay attention to the observations, but back out the important dates. Go and write in 45 days until this particular holiday. We all do it when we're kids with how many days till Christmas or how many days to our birthday or how many days do we go on vacation. We all write those things and we know those things and we count them down. Well, use that same principle to help you here. Because the guiding process is you should not be surprised. You should not be surprised. We've got a very important thing that we do, and that is we oversee transactions. We're the ones that are supposed to have superior knowledge. We're the ones that are supposed to know. And this is what I'm trying to tell you is it can be seamless. It can be smooth. You can avoid a huge mess by knowing these things in advance and preparing your people for them. Because here's the thing, you're going to have to coach your clients and your referral partners through the interruptions. You're going to have to make them aware. You're going to have to come up with the calendar because they're not doing it. In fact, you may not do it. In fact, you didn't know you were supposed to do it, most of you, I'm sure, until we started speaking about it. So the point that I'm trying to make to you is understand this is valuable information. This becomes an important part about how we can do our job. It's something like this that's not going to happen at a lot of companies. People are not going to be aware of this until it's too late to do anything or overcome. And that's why you're on this call. That's why you partake in these sessions. That's why I am doing what it is that I do, the things that I do, and how I coach my people so that they can handle things for their clients and their referral partners to make this whole thing appear to be seamless. But it's highly professional when you plan. You have to take into consideration all these factors. And yes, I know it's August 14th. And I know it could be, 110 degrees where you're sitting today. And I'm talking about the challenges that we're going to have closing loans the end of December, or what to do about Labor Day, or how Halloween is important. There's also that little thing that I didn't put in there called the election. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's going on. You've got to be prepared. And the last thing that's on here is, hey, just plan your time. If you plan the time, you will enjoy this work. You will profit from this work. Taking the time now to do these steps will save you untold amount of frustration. Same with your clients. And may also put you instead for them to have a certain degree of professionalism, a certain degree of expertise in preparing them for what's going to happen. So please, take a look at this stuff as we go into the final third of the year. And understand from me that I do this with my private clients. I try to keep them aware of what's going on. And I finally decided that this year was going to be a year that I was going to go to the forefront with this and actually explain the different thirds of the year and do it as preemptively as possible, not just so I think about reminding my people to do this or bits and pieces of this or having the conversation, but to be very proactive and get this out there in front of people. Because I've decided that not only for me as a coach and my clients, it's something that my clients can take forward to their referral partners, to their clients, and really separate themselves with somebody who's a true professional. So I know this is a crazy thing, and I know a lot of you are probably scratching your head, and you're going to leave this call saying, Mike's finally lost his mind. He spent a phone call in August talking to me about the logjam of closing dates around the holidays, and I may be. But it's a competitive advantage because as you approach the final part of the year, there are a number of different factors that take place. Knowing that people are thinking about moving after Labor Day, after their kids go back to school. Knowing to call those pre-approvals that you have who are self-employed, who had tax extensions, who you now may be able to qualify for more money, or they may be able to qualify for a loan now. Those are the things that you can do that put money in your pocket right away. Being prepared for holidays, being prepared for what happens at the end of this year, knowing about the possibility of having the forgiven part of a short sale becoming taxable again after December 31st if Congress doesn't act. All these things are going to be every bit as important as to what the Federal Reserve does with interest rates, what happens in the housing market, who wins this election. Except those things are the obvious. Everybody can see those coming. If interest rates start to go up, it's a big deal. If the housing market sputters or picks up, it's a big deal. Who wins the election is going to be a big deal. What happens after the election is going to be a big deal. You need to be prepared for it because these little things end up being a big deal because you're thinking about them when others aren't. So please, take some time, put this together. You will be amazed at the opportunities you'll be able to come across. Our next call is scheduled for September the 18th. Again, if you've got any questions or comments, please let me know. Any success stories, any of these things that you're doing that turn into money for you, I'd really like to have them. I'd like to do some video testimonials, if you would, and put them up on the website. For those of you who have not been going to the website, it's www.improvemytomorrowcoaching.com. There's a lot of stuff that's on there. For those of you who haven't friended the Facebook page, or gone and seen the blog, you can go. The blog is posted every week either to Twitter or to my Facebook page, or it's on my own coaching website. You just go over and you click on the button, and it'll drop drop down and you'll see for the blog site, and you can go from there. It's information comes out every Thursday. The blog posts are out there. I never publish anything in the blog that you guys don't get first, so you always get first crack at it. But sometimes there's little things that I put in the blog that I don't necessarily bring up. They're random thoughts and experiences, or the things that people are doing that for time constraints may not be able to be shared on this call. I want you guys to be engaged. And as we go forward, I want this to become, a place where it's not just me telling all of you about what other people are doing. It's where you guys start sharing success stories, things that you've tried, spins that you've put on things, things that we've talked about that you've been able to benefit from, because ultimately that becomes a big deal. And if we have a big enough success where you feel strongly enough about it, I'd love to have you share a call where I could interview you about the situation. Doesn't have to be the entire call. Could be 10 or 15 minutes, and I can bring you into the call and we can talk about it. So next call, September 18th. Any questions or comments, please let me know. I want you guys to go out there and be prepared, because this last part of the year, a strong finish and a great beginning into 2013 really goes a long way. There's a lot of business out there that we need to get out there and get closed. And I don't want you taking your foot off the gas for a split second, but I want you prepared, and I don't want you derailed over how the calendar affects us all. So thanks for being part of the call, and I look forward to speaking to you again next month.